This is Changeling the Podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the Podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host, Josh, and with us is your other host, Pooka. Say hi, Pooka.
Abracadabra alakazam!
What are we talking about today, Pooka?
Today is a day of magic words, but we are also flipping pages about magic words as we talk about sorcerers.
Yes, we're opening up the grimoire.
Yes, three of them. The threefold grimoire. I forget, what's the distinction again? In Mage, there's grimoires, there's primers.
Oh, no, I can't.
Something else. It's not as bad as in D&D, because in D&D you get like librams and manuals and all of that.
But... Oh, and it's the other magic items and distinctions in Mage or even more.
Yeah. What? Anyway, we have 3 books, all of which could be referred to by the title Sorcerer. But for distinction, we have World of Darkness Sorcerer, which was the OG first one, and not even a book associated with a specific game. It was a general World of Darkness book. Then Sorcerer for Mage Revised, which was a Mage-associated book, and then Sorcerer for Mage 20th Anniversary Edition.
Mm-hmm.
So, a bit scattershot.
Yep. The M21, another sad thing, saw the consulting developer of Terry Robinson.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have a favorite? I think you've said M20 might be your choice.
I think, like, if you look at, there's things about all of them I like, but we can get into. But if I'm talking about, like, which one would I want to actually use in a game, it's M20 Sorcerer is my favorite.
Yeah, and I think we'll be focusing primarily on that because it is the current or most recent, I guess I should say at this point, edition.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit that Revised is where my heart lies because it was the first one of these 3 that I read, and I just spent so many hours with it. So we tried to do a sorcery game, my one sibling and I, or in particular a psychic game, and it never really got off the ground, but I always thought that would have been interesting.
I think the actual, if you're just reading the like descriptions of things and the art and stuff, I think actually the original one really holds up. But
it does, yeah.
Like
as a lore book in particular.
The revised one gets bonus points for really mentioning Changeling a lot.
Yeah.
Which M20 Sorcerer almost doesn't at all.
Yeah. And still, I mean, when you say a lot, it's not that much.
No, but like compared
more than the other 2.
And when they're talking about crossover stuff, it's like you can tell it's like they're. I think they might mention it at least as often as they're mentioning like vampire. So,
yeah, I would characterize the OG one as kind of like, I mean, it was their first attempt to draw together threads that had appeared previously. Because to be clear, sorcerers were first introduced way back in like first edition Vampire, I think in either the Hunters Hunted or the Inquisition. So they definitely existed before Mage, although Mage was probably in the works at the time. But the original book, yeah, it kind of has, let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And the level of detail in the voices of the sorcerers from each group, I think, is really impressive. It also introduced like the crunchy bits. You know, you have the Fairy Companion merit, the Fey Blood merit, the Geasa Flaw, the Dreamcraft.
Is that the first place those were there?
I don't know at what point those things were introduced into the game lines, but they certainly appear there in a full write-up. And then Revised, the write-ups, I mean, they're a little bit more functional, I guess. They talk about like, here's how they get initiated, here's how their magic style works, so you can see the mage influence in terms of like paradigm. But that book, I think its main contribution is really in-depth advice on storytelling, which the other 2 books don't really have.
Yeah.
And then M20 just, it's coherent in terms of mechanics more than the other 2 for sure.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it gives enough description of the groups and stuff to know what to do with them and whatnot. It's not like,
yeah, certainly as a splash into a game.
But it also, like, one thing with sorcerers, it seems like over time it went from like this other thing to being like
Mm,
a different kind of lesser, not as respected mages, I guess. But
yeah.
like M20 Sorcerer is the one that actually feels like a mage supplement to me, even though Revised was I can know how to use it. It's like they actually it works. Like beforehand they had mage books talking about how like the technocracy, and they called their sorcerers like enlightened, what was it? The
Extraordinary citizens.
extraordinary citizens, right? But like mechanically that made no sense, because it's like, okay, you're in the technocracy, you're like waving your hands around and chanting a spell to shoot a fireball. Like what? But this actually took that in, which is not really that relevant to Changeling, but
I always sort of envisioned them as being like the weirding modules in David Lynch's Dune, where you hold up this device and go cha and blow a hole through a wall, things like that.
yeah.
But, so I'm going to read out this definition from the introduction to M20 Sorcerer, because I think it actually pretty solidly hits all of the points, where it says, though they refer to themselves and their practices by an array of names, Sorcerer refers to those who use hedge magic as hedge wizards. Unlike mages who alter reality on a fundamental level with their arts, hedge wizards work within the confines of reality, crafting magical effects that operate on established, calculable, and predictable principles. Most hedge magic is less flashy and bombastic than true magic, but that doesn't mean it is weak or easily dismissed. A proficient and knowledgeable hedge wizard can achieve staggering effects with their workings, given sufficient time and resources. So yeah, I mean, if you're familiar with mage, these sorcerers, they don't have as much latitude in the kinds of effects that they do. They don't just put spheres together any which way. Terry used to use this distinction that I think, was it results-based rather than process-based magic? I don't know if that's from one of the other gameologists out there.
That
But
that came up. That sounds like a White Wolf Forums mage, some forum thing.
maybe, yeah. But that to me seems like a distinction that might apply here, where sorcerers are more results based and mages are more process based, maybe, where it's like, yeah, you can do these 5 things in order, and then dynamic mages are more, no, it's not about that. It's about shaping reality in different directions using your will focused through your, well, focus, to use the M20 term. But the original form of the systems, I would say it was more results based because it was derived from like thaumaturgy and vampire.
Yeah.
You have 1 through 5 dots. Each level does a thing.
Yeah. I think you'd actually talk in a Changeling, comparing it with Changeling, like sorcerers are more, they're more like cantrips, right? And maybe in a way you could think of the mages as more like unleashing, but not really. But
I mean, to a degree.
yeah, but the other thing with a lot of the sorcery, now they also in this book have psychic stuff, which is
Yes.
this
We'll get to
whole
that.
other thing. But for the sorcery stuff, it's like you don't have to necessarily do everything in rituals depending on your path, but really is a good idea to do everything in rituals, and they're much more like deliberative and stuff. So it's like it kind of feels like cantrips, but like let's do your cantrip over the next 3 weeks
Right.
with extended rolls, instead of you get one roll and you're done like most cantrips. So
Well, and maybe you've looked at this more recently than I have for this episode, but what is the mechanical advantage of doing a ritual over a spell per M20 sorcerer? Is it just more successes?
well, more successes, and there's a lot of things that can only be done in rituals.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. Like you roll once and you're like, and you need a lot of successes potentially if you want to do
Yeah.
things. Like again, a sorcerer can do things with like a straight up roll if they're caught unawares or something, depending on their path, but they'll do way more with prep and proper working and all that stuff.
Yeah. So from the M20 standpoint, the core mechanics are that you choose a casting attribute and an affinity path from the list of your fellowship, or make it your own choice if you're an unaligned sorcerer. The path then has associated abilities, and you choose an ability which caps the number of dots you can have in that path. So the example they give in the book is that if you use Occult for the path of Hellfire, you can't have Hellfire 5 if you only have Occult 3. So that attribute and ability become the basis for your dice pool. The paths are divided into spells, which take 1 turn per level, and rituals, which take 10 minutes per level. But in both cases, the catalyzing roll, you spend a point of willpower, roll attribute plus ability, The difficulty is the path level of the power plus 4. The successes you get can be spread through what are called aspects. There are general ones like area, duration, number of targets, things like that. Kind of similar to the Shen system that we saw.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
And then I think it's all paths have one, or maybe one or more unique aspects in addition. Is it all paths have one?
I didn't
I think
check them
I didn't either.
all.
That's the structure of it, though.
Yeah.
And then botches tend to have their own very bad things that happen as consequences that are kind of individualized to the paths. But that's basically it. I mean, it's the same kind of linear systems that you see with like disciplines or, again, thaumaturgy.
Yeah. It's like I put it in between thaumaturgy and cantrips in terms of how regimented it is in that regard.
Yeah. And you can construct your own rituals, and there's advice for creating your own paths and everything too. So even though it's kind of unfairly sometimes referred to as static magic, it's just less dynamic than the totally freeform sphere system, which itself is not always as freeform as it might appear.
Yeah, it's not as freeform as Unleashings, which is just
Right. That being said, Unleashings, I don't think they fully thought that one through. The main advantage, though, for sorcerers is that they don't have to deal with paradox. They're not forcing reality to bend to their will. They're rigidly following principles of reality that just not that many people know about.
And if there's disbelief, there's rules for that where it just gets harder to do stuff if there's mortals around who would be like, it's just a number of witnesses.
Yeah.
Just remove successes from your roll.
Rules as written, they also have more dice to roll for their ends. Like, it's often pointed out that a powerful sorcerer can outclass a weak mage, or at least a narrow-minded mage who doesn't know how to prepare or improvise.
Yeah.
Because sorcerers quickly get really good at doing their specific things, while a mage more slowly improves in all the things at once within a sphere, I guess.
I mean, that's also true with changelings. Like,
yeah, I suppose.
Like a changeling, if you're talking same amount of XP put into it, and you're just talking about like, I don't know, a very narrow area that the changeling's good at.
Yeah,
they'll tend to be better than the mage would be in that specific narrow area. So,
which with Arts and Realms, if you remember from our C20 core book changes episode, I have an issue with because I like being a generalist rather than a specialist. But yeah. Speaking of changelings, though, the subtopic here is: can or should the fae have hedge magic?
So there is one thing they mention actually in the M21. We'll get into the groups of mages later, but there's a very fae associated one.
There is.
This is the only known sorcerer bloodline more likely to go through a changeling chrysalis than awaken as a mage. So you can at least do sorcery before you go through your chrysalis.
Truth.
I think I would have questioned that before I read that. So
I don't know that there's ever been a complete. Well, yeah, I don't know. Certainly, there's always been the statement that changelings will never awaken. But yeah, whether they can do sorcery before they crystallize, who knows? Or after they get undone, for that matter.
And then what about Kinane?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Fenians are all Kinane, so...
Yeah, I guess they could.
Pretty much.
Well, except for the ones that are changelings. And don't realize it yet.
Fundamentally, though, the books generally say no, changelings, full-on changelings can't have hedge magic, but they kind of use different reasons. I'm going to throw another quote in here because I like turning to the actual books for explanations sometimes. And this is from the Revised Mage book, where they say, full supernaturals, changelings, werewolves, vampires, mages, and wraiths, are powerful. They have arts, gifts and rights, disciplines, spheres, and arcanoi. As with many other things, you should think carefully before allowing them even more power. You might decide to allow them to use sorcery and such things just like anyone else. After all, points spent on sorcery aren't spent on disciplines or other powers, so hopefully they'll balance. You might give them penalties. Perhaps sorcery has a higher cost in freebie and experience points. You could even justify this by saying that these creatures have other, more innate abilities to concentrate on, so sorcery doesn't come naturally. Or you could say that these creatures simply can't learn sorcery. Perhaps it's an inherently mortal and human thing by mystical fiat.
Yep.
And I like that last bit. I mean, overall, this is an explanation that's grounded in the setting rather than mechanical balance, I would say. But that last bit, like, let mortals have something a little bit special to themselves, you know?
Yeah, and it depends on what the heck sorcery is supposed to be.
Yeah.
If it's something innate to the person, then yeah, I think it shouldn't be possible. But if is supposed to be like it's saying here, the cheat codes of like not that you could, like you're just going into like existing rule, like you just understand something about the world works that science, like maybe most scientists don't know, right? Then I think anybody should be able to use it, just like anybody can take like abilities, like knowledges and skills and things.
Yeah.
But that's like a metaphysical question for your table,
Right.
not like game balance wise. I don't think there's really a problem that I can think of with, like, I mean, you'd have headaches, and maybe you can just be like, as a storyteller, you don't want to deal with it because it would be like, what happens when your knocker tries to use alchemy on their chimerical creation, right? You have to answer that question, but
Yeah.
I mean, that could still happen with your kinane
Yeah.
who's trying
Yeah,
to
no, that's
use.
fair. Yeah. Personally, I mean, yeah, obviously it depends on your table. I tend to vote for no, they can't have it, but with a big old however attached.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I'm
um,
more permissive. I'm like, sure, why not? But
well, so if I can zoom in on Changeling in particular with this, my feeling is that the Fae don't really need human hedge magic. And
oh yeah, will they
given,
take it? No.
but also given that because they're already operating under the rules of two realities at once. And
Yeah.
so it seems strange for them to engage with a form of magic that's so heavily grounded in just the one. What I do think though, and I put this in my notes because I was like thinking this out, you could make interesting rules around this. So like for example, yes, changelings can use and participate in sorcery, but if it's something that they could have just as easily used a cantrip that they have, they get a banality trigger because they're relying on autumn world rules rather than the dreamings. Maybe that's a bit too punitive, but
Mm, that's very
I'm as
uh
an idea, as a
yeah.
possibility, or maybe to
Yeah.
extend that, they could learn dots of mortal sorcery up to their banality rating, like have that be the cap because it's their autumn heritage that defines it.
I don't think any of this should be banal. I don't think sorcery has
Well,
to
I
be
don't.
inherently banal at all.
I'm spitballing.
Yeah. Cuz I feel like I don't see why that would be the case, but not like dots of computers.
Because it's not that sorcery is inherently banal, it's that they are neglecting to pursue their dreaming side.
Mm,
That's what the way that I would frame it,
yeah.
thinking it through. But all of that being said, this is my however, I quite like creating bespoke sorceries for games. So, full
Mhm.
disclosure, for the upcoming Book of Grimmare, one of the things that we have are sorceries for the Fae. But much as mortal sorcery, despite being more limited than dynamic magic, is or can be grounded in the same principles, so too are the rituals for Book of Grimmare grounded in the same principles as the Fey arts writ large.
I will say don't do what the book implies, although it doesn't explicitly state this. It doesn't really say what happens. If you're playing an ongoing Kinane Fenian
Mhm.
sorcerer who's developed the sorcery stuff as an ST, don't just like go put them through their chrysalis and then say, "Well,
Yeah.
you lost all that. You're now don't do that." Yeah,
And there are conversions here and there for like changing the dots around, but
yeah.
I can't remember.
And also, like, if you're like, I think you're also fully justified as your changeling ST, and if you happen to have a Kinane PC, which you don't have to allow anyway either, but like,
Mhm.
fine, and like, you don't have to let them take sorcery
No.
either. And I feel that's a bigger question: is do you want to bring in this entire other magical system into your changeling game, or even like your mage game if you're not, or whatever, right? Like,
Right.
it's still, it's going to add more complications. It's going to add like lots of questions. Like I think the rules in the M20 Sorcerer work pretty well from what I can tell, but like they definitely don't handle the weird things that would happen if you try to use them in a changeling game, like the PCs trying to mix and match it. So you have to figure out a lot of things. And if you want to as a storyteller, sure, and I'm cool with doing that, but like don't feel like you have to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be markedly more difficult than any other kind of crossover game, which is difficult to set up, but people do it.
Yeah. But it's a little bit different with crossover when it's in the same player character is crossover.
Yeah, within the same character, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't think hedge magic as presented in canon should be one size fits all. Like I don't
Hmm.
think everyone should follow the same principles of how this sorcery works. But I like the concept of it's almost like with cultural diffusion. You have this idea of a more fixed rote, if you will, ritualized set of magical effects. That idea, I like the idea of different groups other than sorcerers adapting that for themselves. I mean, that's what the Tremere did, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's definitely up to the storyteller because it'll fundamentally change the dynamic of the
Ooh.
game.
Oh, there's the other question. If Changeling can take sorcery, then vampires should be able to too, and that's another.
They have enough of it. I tried to create this system of like blood alchemy for the New Orleans game that I was in on Discord because my character was a chiassid mixologist at a speakeasy for vampires. And I was so into it, and then the game imploded, so I never got to use it. But someday this will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Did we want to go through the groups next?
I've got a few groups. I don't think we need to go through all of them.
Yeah. No, but some of the groups that are not all of them.
Yes, the fellowship.
The groups also include, there's beyond the fellowships, at least in M20 Sorcerer, they very explicitly say all the mage groups.
Yeah.
So the technocracy and the traditions and the disparates.
They've got their own little junior colleges.
Yeah.
So yeah, among the fellowships which are not entirely associated with those, we have the Fenian.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to say Fenian. I don't know why. I know it's Fenian, but anyway, they're straight up Canaan sorcerer shapeshifters, which kind of covers all your bases. They've got Celtic ancestry. They're all closely related. They claim descent from the Tuatha and half Fae, presumably changelings. And most interestingly, maybe, each of them is under particular geasa, so these taboos and prohibitions. I love this sidebar in M20 when it takes pains to point out that geasa and folklore can often be mutually contradictory, whence the death of Cuchulainn and whatnot. So that's nice for stories.
And it's basically talked about, like, make sure to talk to your players about that and all that.
Yeah. And those oaths from the long ago can strain their power that would otherwise likely be pretty considerable. Like they have to pay extra XP and stuff, but it says there's several dozen alive and active. That still seems like a pretty good number. I mean, that seems like at least as large as some of the crafts that are out there. But they favor fascination, shapeshifting, and weather control as their paths.
No neuromancy. Yeah.
Well, because the next one, the Silver Portal, they're the foremost Oniromancers. They used to be called the Zolondrodere, which was purportedly the name of an ancient Persian scroll that was adapted into a tome that was translated into a book from which they derived their knowledge. Love it. Their core idea is that every thought and idea exists in the dream state, or dream world, or the dreaming, if you will. But the Maya, because this is a mage book. And it's just waiting to be brought into reality by somebody strong enough to breach the barriers. So basically manifesting Chimera. They probably know more about changelings than even lots of mages, to be honest, or the fae in general, I would say.
Yeah.
And the really wild thing that I love about them mechanically is that each time they access their magic through the dream trance state, they can redistribute their dots among whichever hedge magic path they want, because they remember different things from the universal subconscious. Awesome. Like that to me, I feel like you would need to run a Silver Portal game on its own. It just gets so hectic.
Well, I guess it could cross over with a changeling game with Oneromancy changelings, and then you're both going on dream walking.
Yeah, pulling different things into reality. Other ones that I wanted to talk about. So the Star Council and their associated group, the Thalhun, they're not...
They feel very changeling to me.
Well, they do.
Yeah,
because they're not directly connected in the same way as the first two might be, but the story possibilities. So the Star Council are described as like wide-eyed explorers of the universe, and then the Thalhun are more conspiracy theorists, but both believe that aliens are responsible for disseminating the secrets of the universe to humanity long ago. And like the Star Council are mainly psychics, the Thalhun have this resonant power language, much like David Lynch's Dune, I guess. But yeah, so given all the other story possibilities around connecting Fae with aliens, like that's an easy setup of a mistaken identity story that goes places. So, what if you had like a changeling setting themselves up to a sorcerer as an alien in disguise, and then when they enchant the mortal, that's them like revealing their true self, and then they have a sorcerer in their retinue.
Yep, I feel like that would be... Oh no, that's a different group. Never mind.
I mean, more sinisterly, you could also just go full X-Files and have like, here's the government
Yeah.
sorcerer trying to capture and dissect one. So
Well, there's that example of the undone, or whatever that means in C20,
yeah,
ufologist too. And it's like,
yeah. Anyway, I think it's more interesting when it's like the History Channel guy going aliens.
yep.
The last one that I wanted to mention is the Uzoma, who I think are only a distinctive group in the second edition Sorcerer book.
No, they're an M20 sorcerer.
Oh, are they? Oh, I didn't scroll down far enough.
Yeah, they're the last one because it's alphabetical order.
Ah, okay, there we go. Yeah, because they were a group in the second edition, then revised indicated that they had been folded into the Ngoma and or the traditions, and now in M20 they've been split back out again.
So are they supposed to be sorcerer specific, right? Not a awakened craft?
Yeah.
At all?
They are specifically keeping the traditions of the Orishas alive, which in second edition they're more explicitly connected with the issue as a result.
You also have other cultural tie ones like the Thorn Yafnather. I'd probably mess up.
Fornjafnazar, yeah.
Yeah.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, like, you could get your troll connection there or something like that, although probably needed conversation about neo-Nazi infiltration and stuff, because that does happen. And then there's like the dozen priests of the Pythian order and the Greek stuff. Like there's all the Changeling has like these other cultural stuff, right? It's not simply Celtic. So, all of them also, there's groups for a lot of other cultures listed in here. So
it points to this broader angle with sorcerers and fae because, the magicians, more than the traditions, and they're kind of more like the crafts in this regard, they are generally associated with a specific culture and its beliefs because they believe those beliefs so strongly that they can bend reality with techniques rooted in them. So they probably likely have equally strong beliefs about beings like the fae in their specific folklore and how to deal with them.
Which might not be good feelings, but yes, they have them.
No. I would say belief in the fae can correlate with glamour, but one doesn't necessarily follow the other, nor do these magicians have to be nice about that belief. So whether you're looking at that through the perspective of African lore with the Uzoma or Irish lore with the Fenian or any of the other groups, it is a relevant question for thinking about if you're doing a crossover like this.
Yep.
What does your mortal sorcerer feel about the little folk of their specific culture? Could get banal. Doesn't have to, but could.
Or it could be like good for some fae and bad for other fae. So
yeah. Shall we talk about the magic itself?
Yes. We're not going to go in detail about all the paths, I don't think.
No, there's so many.
Yeah.
I picked out 3.
Yeah.
Did you have any favorites in the mix?
I mean, the Oneiromancy was interesting. It has a question that I don't think was... I don't know the answer to from reading the text. When it says you enter dreams, does it mean you're lying there dreaming, or does it mean like it's like Oneiromancy where you actually go into the dream, like Changeling Oneiromancy? It doesn't say.
I mean, my assumption would be the former, which would align it more closely with mage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you could.
It doesn't actually say, though. That was the interesting thing.
No, yeah.
You enter the dream. Well, how literal is that?
Well, yeah, so Oneiromancy, and remember, these aren't as versatile as full-on mage magic would be, and in many cases not even as versatile as Arts and Realms would be, but they can still have an impact. So Oneiromancy's unique aspect, and you can also have the sympathetic connection aspect, which is one of like the general ones, but its bespoke one is dream walking, which allows you to, in order, 1 through 5, see flashes of dreams, enter dreams, watch dreams clearly from outside them, send dreams, and create shared dreams for that inception realness. And there's also an aspect, or a capital A aspect, a feature somewhere about taking control of dreams as well, but forget where that is. Somewhere. So yeah, I like it. It's rather, I would say, less potent than fae-oneiromancy, but still has its uses.
But they have some rich sample rituals that show those can kind of do other things that are associated with dreams. So
yeah. The very next one is quintessence manipulation.
I did not expect you to pick that one.
Well, so, all right. Its aspects are area and duration, so you can spend successes on spreading out the effect or making it last longer. And then its specific aspect of flow allows you to, in order, sense energies, reveal the imprint of energies, disrupt them, control their flow, and counter magic entirely. And it becomes relevant when you allow for the mage perspective that glamour is just a rarefied form of quintessence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's up to the storyteller how much one-to-one correspondence they would want to allow for that. But just imagine how disruptive it would be if a human sorcerer could, like, for example, prevent a changeling from spending their glamour. It's like, you're not calling on the weird today. So
Ooh, yeah.
it's kind of a left field impact. But and then the other one I had is itself a threefold path because it's summoning, binding, and warding. So you can learn, I guess, separately. I think they're each individual paths. They're just kind of collected into one because you really should learn the other two if you learn any one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Separately, they allow you to summon a being, compel a being, or learn to protect yourself from a being, dependent on which lore you're studying. So you would want fae lore for this. And this is a fun one when the sorcerer botches, because the price of failure is they think they've succeeded. Anyway, with the summoning one, you can draw a changeling to the place and then prevent them from harming you, from harming the sorcerer. So imagine like a she being on the receiving end of like human sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
And then the specific aspect for the binding path prevents the target from harming the magician, compels them to answer a single question truthfully. So I don't know how a pooka deals with that, but yeah. At level 3, they have to answer all questions truthfully and perform one service to the literal interpretation of the words. Level 4, they perform a task as directed. Level 5, their binding can be given to someone of the summoner's choosing. Might be like a trigger warning kind of thing for a game.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of using that, or maybe something based off ephemera, or something like where you have a sorcerer who doesn't even know about the Kithane or changelings or whatever, but they're dealing with chimera.
Yeah.
And I think that could be interesting. And it's like an NPC or something where you're like, there's something going on with the local chimera in your area, and things are getting all weird, and you find out like there's just this mortal doing stuff with chimera, and you're like, what is happening? And yeah, now they have like an army of nervosa or whatever with them, or whatever.
So would you say ephemera would be like one of your picks?
Yeah, or I don't know if I'd use ephemera literally for that, or like you take ephemera and just tweak it slightly for chimera. But yes, something like
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also thinking like hobgoblins, marauder sorcerers kind of
that.
thing. I'm like, I don't know how I would make that work, but I would.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's also things like fascination, which is emotional manipulation,
Yep.
or
Fortune, I love. I like fortune a lot.
fortune's great.
The highest level fortune ritual they list is generational wealth, where you basically self-sacrifice to have your descendants be rich for the next 7 generations. Like,
Yeah. Illusion's a good one too, I have to say.
mm-hmm.
There's great stuff in here. I mean, even like I'm thinking about this from the perspective of doing a changeling oriented thing, but like if you just do a full on sorcerer game, there's so many weird and cool things.
Mm-hmm.
Starlight, like
Yeah, yeah. The shadow one, I was always like, but I haven't really read through
yeah,
properly on this one. But some of them, you're like,
human obtenebration.
yeah,
There's also psychic powers if you want to go
yeah.
that path.
I mean, the anti-psychic could be an interesting, like, somewhere in between a Dantean and a Autumn person.
Yeah. And I wonder if like astral projection could get you into the dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I think is my pick for like most relevant though is psychic vampirism,
Mm.
where I'm going to read through here. Level 1 lets the psychic vampire feed on emotions. Level 2 lets them drain willpower. Level 3 lets them feed on life force, represented as damage. Level 4 lets them affect a crowd. And level 5 lets them tap previous victims from a distance. And you could get a really robust antagonist out of that. Like plant one of those in a group that has a lot of dreamers and just see what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
And psychic invisibility is basically like the mists almost. So that's kind of dude.
Yeah. Psychometry is a fun one. I love psychometry in
Mm-hmm.
fiction. But yeah, functionally, I mean, in terms of mechanics, they're basically the same. I think it's willpower is the cap and the difficulty is +3 instead of +4, and there's no rituals. That's like the key.
I thought you're only rolling willpower.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just rolling willpower.
Yeah. So it's both your dice pool and your cap. Interesting.
Mm.
Or half of it is your cap. I'm sorry. Half
Mhm.
willpower. There's fun crunch in the other books too. Like the original book, in addition to those merits, has like artifacts and stuff thrown in at various points. I think M20 also has artifacts. Maybe it's the alchemy path has them. I remember seeing cool ones and being like, ah. So
Yeah, no, it was either alchemy or enchantment, which is not the same thing as changeling enchantment.
right. Yeah. And there's also from the M20 rules, there are some solid rules for counter magic where again you need to have the relevant lore. So Fey lore in this case would give you counter magic against cantrips, and you need to have 2 dots in it and spend 3 XP on top of that, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But once you've learned that skill, you can roll the dice pool of your affinity path at difficulty 8 to subtract successes from an incoming cantrip. And if you come across a cantrip that's already been cast that fits within the parameters of the path, you can do the same thing to unweave it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. And there's rules for like teamwork, sorcery, and hanging spells and fast casting and all that. But I think for like a one-off character, you probably wouldn't need
Yeah.
to get into
Yeah,
all of
that's all like you have a group, you have a sorcerer game, but it is nice to be able to. It's some of the better magical cooperation rules I've seen in any game.
Yeah, lots of options. So then let's wrap it up. Let's talk about integrating sorcerers into a game.
Mm-hmm.
How does one do?
So I mean, the easiest, I guess, one is like NPCs, especially antagonists or potential allies or things that you're not quite sure what's going on. There's a lot, we've mentioned that, and there's a lot of different ways you could do that, I think, and that's sort of the most straightforward crossover type thing in general. But the idea is it's a mortal, like you just have this mortal who can just do things mortals aren't supposed to be able to do, for as far as your changeling was concerned. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the Fenians and their connection to the Fae, and the Kinane in general learning sorcery, or perhaps psychic Kinane, but yep,
Oh, that gets real weird.
yeah, or the could an autumn person get the anti psychic?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Why not?
yeah. They're just very skeptical of everything.
Yeah. I mean, they have their stigmas and whatnot, so they might not
Hmm.
need. But yeah. Because for me, one of the main thematic things that sorcerers underscore is that, glamour and magic are not the same thing. In some ways, even starker than with mages, because there's not necessarily any like deep enlightenment behind a sorcerer's abilities. They're just
Yeah,
they're doing what they've learned to do through memorization and repetition. And they might even be more banal than like sorcerer banality is maybe more intense than mage banality, because mage banality, they're imposing their will on reality, right? But their worldview that informs that will can be very glamorous, whereas a sorcerer is like doing what I've been told. You know, I imagine changeling encountering banal human, changeling assuming that human can't do magic, changeling is in for a rude surprise when boring human suddenly throws a fireball at them. Like that's
yeah.
the kind of situation that
Well,
I'm envisioning.
here's a question: does the autumn she frailty apply to sorcerers and psychics in
In
the picking up
oh,
stalkers
the
sense?
adoration.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm gonna have to review that frailty to see.
but the one where you just like you pick up stalkers basically, and it's like now have a sorcerer of some kind who's maybe even near Arcanum or whatever,
I
who's obsessed with
I
you.
guess so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not? They'd probably be even less likely than mages to perceive Fae for what they are, too.
yeah.
So,
I don't even know what powers in this book would even let you perceive a fae any better than any other mortal could.
I mean, imagine you can take dots of awareness, right? That's
Yeah, or which is just basically kenning, but yeah. But that's again, so can mortals. Any mortal can take
right.
kenning too, right? So it's not. They just know there's something weird about you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's what the Fae lore for the summoning binding warding is for, I guess.
Yep. My own personal preference, by the way, is to like say no, you don't take fairy lore, you just take Grey Mary. But
Well, that
yeah,
works fine.
yeah,
And I mean, of course, you could have a low banality sorcerer as an enemy too, which is equally scary.
yep. You could also have enemy powerful she with sorcerers working for them.
Yeah. There was a group in, I can't remember now if it was one of the homebrews I read or one of the games I interviewed for the publisher at PAX or whatever, I can't remember, but there was the group of antagonists who are specifically after fairy parts for their magic.
Yep.
And I love that. Like, they need parts to do their magic, which is a great hook. Because they're not going to give that magic up, and they're never going to have enough parts.
I just realized another possible antagonist.
Ooh.
In Dreams and Nightmares, there's the species of chimera called enchanters.
Yes.
And it's said that they can take a reed that lets them take sorcery. And combined with the sorcery at M20, that could be really potent.
Yeah. At least they can't take true magic.
Yeah.
On the flip side, looking at allies, because I don't like C20 Canaan and I look for ways to tone them down, having a sorcerer template applied to like an old school Canaan,
Yeah.
like use sorcery instead of giving them all their powers now, that would be, dare I use the adjective, maybe more street level than having like a Canaan mage in the C20/M20 systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's unclear how that even works, a C20.
See, the storytellers, they'll supplement fairy faith.
But a C20, mechanically, the C20 Canaan just don't work with mages even though, anyway. Like you could have one.
It gets complicated.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of, like you said before, 2 Oneiromancers, one full fae and one merely fae-blooded, figuring out how to do dream tomfoolery together.
Yep.
And given how the paths are sorted out, the Canaan sorcerer in question could then have other skills that fae magic generally doesn't cover. So like spirit magic or wacky alchemy or necromancy.
There's lots of weird crossovers, like cross splat but united theme, like also the wraiths that have the dream thing too, and like those, and maybe you're all the same family. Who knows?
Yeah, I want to do one more passage, which is quite a bit longer, but it's the section entitled "Crossover Chronicles" at the end of Sorcerer Revised, and I think it's a few paragraphs long, but it's really, really solid, and I think it covers like all of this.
Yep.
Are you ready? All right.
Ready.
Crossover chronicles are tricky things. They can be very rewarding when done well and very frustrating when done poorly. It takes a great deal of advanced thought and careful judgment to handle a crossover chronicle, especially when mortal sorcerers are involved. It isn't recommended for the new storyteller. First of all, sorcerers are usually much more easily damaged than most other World of Darkness critters. I note on the side here, this doesn't really apply for Changeling. What endangers a werewolf may destroy a sorcerer in seconds. What terrifies a sorcerer is little more than a flea to a werewolf. This means that group combats are almost entirely out. It's virtually impossible to run a combat in which everyone is afraid for his life and yet everyone has a reasonable chance to come out of it alive. Be sure to refer to the earlier section on adjusting the stakes in a Sorcerer's Chronicle. The whole chapter is really good. I'm just going to point that out. So, you'll need to bring in hurdles other than combat. Politics, investigation, puzzles, contests, and personal plots are just some of the substitutions you might make. You might also initiate combat when the group has been split up, or you might work on combats in which it's possible for the, quote, weaker members of the group to hang back out of the worst of the danger but still have an impact on things. Long-range weapons and offensive sorcery can be marvelous equalizers, but try not to let the concept of combat sorcery get out of hand. If your sorcerers are all thinking about which paths let them kill things fastest, then they're missing a lot of the more amazing aspects of playing a sorcerer. Involve everyone in each other's plots. This is one of the largest problems in a crossover chronicle. Unless you're working with very high epic plots in which the group is dragged into something much larger than they are, you need to make sure they all have reasons to work with each other. Make sure they have need of each other's abilities. Give them background ties. If possible, make sure the characters care about one another. You might address the issue of relative power mechanically. One way for sorcerers to be useful in a crossover chronicle is for them to have skills, talents, knowledges, and backgrounds that are needed for the plot. Make sure that not all of your plots may be solved by the application of supernatural ability. Take normal abilities into account. Then you could give sorcerers a few extra freebies to start with, perhaps on the condition that they be used for non-supernatural resources. If their lack of supernatural power turns out to be a problem in your chronicle, fix it one or both of 2 ways. Adjust the ways in which your plots may be solved, or lower the cost of sorcery for sorcerers. So all of that, and the chapter as a whole, solid advice not just for crossovers with sorcerers, but like any game with them, you know? And I wish that the M20 book had like half as much guidance as is in this chapter. One last thing I'll say, you don't have to have your sorcerer ally be a Canaan necessarily. You could have them be a dreamer or
Absolutely not.
just a random human.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on with you, but they understand that you're a little bit special somehow.
I mean, you could tell them.
Yeah,
Like,
but then it's like, will they believe it? I don't know.
yeah.
Probably need to
Well,
sort out with the storyteller what level of merit or background you would need for that, though. I don't think there's a sorcerer companion merit.
yeah, they don't have the allies. I noticed there's no allies background in C20.
It's in the player's guide, isn't it? Didn't they finally
Oh, there is?
include it
Oh, okay.
there?
Okay. Well, anyway, it's an allies background.
There you go. I don't think we have any listener questions that were uncovered, but we do have a comment from Aurora, was it? Pulling it up right now. Yes, Aurora says, Fenian are incredible for including in Changeling games. According to the lore, they came from an ancient pact with the Fae, and the family's abilities are the result. Also, the Gaze aspect is just fun to play with. The M20 Sorcerer book says, this is the only known extant sorcerer bloodline more likely to go through a Changeling chrysalis than awaken as a mage, as we have pointed out. So you could potentially have a Fae-blooded Fenian who goes through chrysalis and emerges as a Kithane at some point in the Chronicle. We need rules for this, though.
Yeah.
Dot redistribution.
Like, if you just took it and said you can pick some arts and realms based on your dots and that, you'd lose a little bit of XP, but...
Yeah. You don't want to punish people for having story development.
No.
Should we talk about the covers?
Sure.
All right. I don't know what's going on in the first one. It's a mad librarian who worships a giant baby head in monochrome red purplish hues. Something. It's a compelling cover. I'll give it that. With very tall letters. Revised is just what I think of with the guys like in a cathedral type space poring over a tome with candles, and he's like, yes, mighty power, and it's just what I associate with them. And then
Mhm.
M20 guys strutting his best self,
Yeah.
shirtless and swole.
The thirst trap sorcerers have people called him in the Discord.
The flaming sword and the swole pecs.
Oh, I thought that was another flaming goblet. I thought it was another goblet, but it's shooting fire out. That makes more sense that it's a sword.
Oh, maybe. Well, I figured, lightsaber katana.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it is a lightsaber katana thing, but he's got a cup in the other hand.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Oh, actually, it is. It is a fire saber. It's an actual saber, unlike a lightsaber, which is not a saber.
Yeah.
Go figure. So, is there anything else about sorcerers that we can or should say?
No, I think that's. I think we covered it all.
From a changeling perspective, at least, yeah. But I would say, if you want to play a sorcerer game, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Changelings or otherwise.
Yeah. If your storyteller wants there to be a sorcerer in your changeling game, then I think it can work.
Yeah. And like I said, I do like the M20 Sorcerer book. I think that the systems are solidly coherent and hang together well.
Mm-hmm.
But the sort of perspectives of the older books, I think, also bring a lot to the table. So if you can get them all, do. If not, go for what appeals to you.
So I guess we should
do a roll for the path of outro.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you want to reach out to us, you can go to our Discord, discord.me/CTP. You can send us an email, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. We're still in Mastodon. You can substitute there, changelingpod@dice.camp. Send us an email, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. Of course, our website, Changing the Podcast. We have our YouTube. You can listen to us there as well for Changing the Podcast, and our Patreon, Changing the Podcast there as well.
Links to all of these, and I mean, probably a Blue Sky. I'm going to keep saying it till it happens.
I tried making one, and then I screwed it up, and now I'm locked out of our account for having one.
Well, we'll work on it. All right, so maybe there won't be a Blue Sky, but links to all of these.
Well,
will
we
be in
could
the
get
show
a Blue
notes.
Sky. It just won't be the name that we were talking about.
Yeah. That's true. We will not have a branded Blue Sky. Anyway.
Yeah, and once again, I'm Josh.
I'm the psychic phenomenon known as Pooka.
I really wish I had one of those psychic kinesis or cyberpathy. It has connection could not die.
Do you believe in sorcery?
The Hedge Magic path of podcasting requires a Wits plus technology roll. Level 1 enables you to speed read a core book of dense material for later commentary. Level 2 makes you painfully sensitive to background noise and the use of filler words and phrases like and both your own and others. Level 3 allows you to find a temporary slapdash fix to any problem with audio equipment. Level 4 grants you the grace and aplomb to manage an associated social media platform, 1 per success. And Level 5 briefly stops time so that you can get all of this ridiculous business done just before episode release. Botching a path roll is when you forget to flag an F-bomb one time and your podcast gets marked as explicit on the platforms forever. Not that we speak from experience about that. If you would like to learn the ways of these and other niche sorceries, do drop by our Discord at www.discord.me/ctp to hang out and join in the conversation. We also appreciate reviews on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience, or you can also help us keep the lights on by signing up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. Some excellent souls who have already done so and therefore get a shout-out include Tarek, Dorcadus, Elris, Iabol, Jason Vines, Oreo, Raz Caboose, Sanchiger, Sija, Simon Strand, and Victor Torre. 100,000 thanks to them. With that, we wish you well in all of your sorceress dabblings, and whether you take up oneromancy or not, as always, make sure to keep on dreaming.